On the 13th of November 2001, a secret document is sent into the White House. The content of the document is extremely sensitive. After changing hands 4 times, it reaches President George W. Bush. He signs without sitting down. The United States of America just decided to completely ignore the Geneva Convention on Prisoners of War. This is one of many documents that will justify American actions in the global war on terror. Actions that include limitless spying on American citizens, widespread torture, and invasions that will cost more lives than the war in Vietnam. Cabinet officials are shocked. What the hell just happened? Where did this come from? The president who signed it is not responsible for its contents. It carries the fingerprints of a person that aren't so many documents the president signed. The fingerprints belong to Dick Cheney, the vice president. Some call him the most powerful vice president in American history. Am I the evil genius in the corner that nobody ever sees? It's a nice way to operate. How did Dick Cheney turn the vice presidency into a position of power? And what did he do when he controlled the White House?
September 11th, 2001 changed everything for this country.
There's this moment when the attacks in New York are happening. A moment that Cheney makes a decision he isn't supposed to make. A moment that shows how he operates.
What's the most important decision you think he made during the course of the day?
Well, I suppose the toughest decision was this question of whether or not we would intercept incoming commercial aircraft.
And we decided
to do it.
In fact, it was Cheney who took this decision. This decision was only later corroborated by the president, who is the only person who should be making these calls. This followed Cheney's mantra, "You know, dear, unless otherwise directed." The idea is simple: you take action unless explicitly told not to. How does this grey-looking, balding bureaucrat position himself on the seat reserved for the president? Cheney combined decades of experience with a preference to operate from the shadows. The current vice president does things differently. J.D. Vance flew to Greenland to accuse longtime NATO ally Denmark of failing to protect Greenland. Whether you believe this is true, or that Vance was creating a crisis to justify America's power grab, that depends on where you get your news from. Which is why I asked Ground News to partner with me for this video. World news is dominated by American news outlets, but not everyone lives in the States. With Ground News you can see beyond this perspective, because they gather global news in their app and their website. And that helps you compare the world's reaction to events like this. Using the app, I can sort through hundreds of reporting sources and see their political bias, their credibility, or their location. You can see how some American outlets are leading with Vance accusing Denmark of underinvesting in Greenland, while Denmark reports how this visit exposes the foreign minister's failing strategy of not taking the US seriously. Cheney knew how important it was to control the narrative. So when American media dominates what we see and what we don't, it can shape public opinion and even policy. This is why I believe in what Ground News is doing. They help you zoom out, track global reactions, and see what news is missing from your feed. So I got my viewers 40% off the unlimited Vantage plan. This is the same one that I've been using. Just click on the link in the description below, ground.news/TPP, or scan the QR code to subscribe and bring the price down to $5 a month. You'd be part of our mission to see world issues more clearly, while also supporting my channel at the same time. And now, let's get back to the video. Cheney's career is like a crash course in rising through the ranks of Washington. Remember that Forrest Gump montage where he is edited in those famous moments?
So are you enjoying yourself in our nation's capital, young man? Yes, sir.
Yeah, Cheney's like that. Except he wasn't edited into history. He was there, shaping it. Under President Nixon, he was a deputy assistant. At age 34, he became the youngest chief of staff in US history. He's been in Congress. He's chaired the House. He served on intelligence committees. Under George Bush Sr., he was Secretary of Defense, overseeing Operation Desert Storm, the military action to liberate Kuwait from the Iraq invasion. One, if not the most successful US military action of the last 50 years. This man has been around. He knows exactly how political power works. So when George Bush needed a running mate, he asked the one guy who knows Washington best.
I am honored by your nomination, and I accept it.
What's weird looking at these clips is that Cheney wasn't even supposed to be the vice president. When Bush calls Cheney, he didn't ask to be his running mate. He wants Cheney to find him one. And the second weird thing is, being vice president is mostly ceremonial. You attend funerals and stuff. You're close to the most powerful person in the world, but you don't have that much power yourself. Or, in the words of a former VP, not worth a bucket of warm piss. Why would such an experienced man want this ceremonial position? Well, let's first see how he got there. Dick Cheney knows more about me than my mother, father, and wife. Normally, when you find a running mate, it's not so different from a job interview. You just also need to pass the top secret security clearance. These are 30 questions with stuff like if you have ever been part of a terrorist organization. But Cheney, he works differently. He created his own system. A document containing some 200 questions. Next to that, he wanted full medical records, unredacted legal documents, detailed financial disclosures, and even intimate details about family members. Things that are usually protected by privacy laws. He even pressed the candidates if there might be anything that could mean they were open to blackmail. He didn't say who would do the blackmailing. By the end of the search, Bush concluded the best candidate was Cheney himself. And Cheney, well, he never completed his own questionnaire. And here's where it gets interesting for Cheney. Bush didn't have this big network that Cheney had, so he tells him, you form the cabinet. And this gave Cheney a chance to form a team that, like him, believed there should only ever be one superpower in the world. A world where international laws and alliances are all fine, but projecting power is better. A world ruled by the United States of America. Cheney went to old allies and people who agreed with his vision. His old friend Donald Rumsfeld returned as Secretary of Defense. He balanced a moderate Colin Powell for Secretary of State with a more hardline John Bolton. Everywhere else, justice, energy, even trade, Cheney inserted people who shared his priorities. And then he seated people all over the system to make sure he was in some way involved with every decision the Bush administration would make. Take his chief of staff, Scooter Libby. He was both Cheney's national security advisor and a key player in White House policy. It gave Cheney control over both foreign and domestic matters, creating what he later called a single executive office. Many called it a parallel administration. You might ask where George W. Bush is in all of this. Well, Bush was very inexperienced, especially in international affairs. You can see that in his campaign. It's based on vibes, education reform.
Huge domestic issue for America as we head into the 21st century is to make sure every single child is educated and not one child is left behind.
And dad jokes.
I'm running against a tough opponent, make no mistake about it. He's a good campaigner and he's got a lot of confidence. So much so that he thinks he invented the internet. But if the man was so smart, how come every internet address begins with W?
Cheney used the president's inexperience to his advantage. He decided what the options were before Bush even knew he had to make a decision. And there were some big decisions coming up. Before the dust even settled in New York, Cheney and his legal counsel, David Editing, asked the question: what extraordinary powers would the president need in the coming war?
Do you believe that the president in time of war, that anything he does is legal?
I think we do, and we have a historic precedent of taking action that you wouldn't take in peacetime, but that you will take sometimes in wartime, is to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
The thing is, Cheney believed that to keep America on top, the president needs to be as powerful as possible. Congress shouldn't be in the way. And this was something he'd already believed a long time. In the 1980s, there's this political scandal. There's a rebel group in Nicaragua that the US Congress has forbidden to fund. The president is then caught funding them anyway. Whoops. Congress is pissed. They immediately step in to take some presidential power away. But Cheney, well, he saw that a bit differently.
Some will argue that these events justify the imposition of additional restrictions on presidents to prohibit the possibility of similar occurrences in the future. In my opinion, that would be a mistake. In completing our task, we should seek, above all, to find ways to strengthen the capacity of future presidents and future Congresses to meet the often dangerous and difficult challenges that are bound to arise in the years ahead.
In 2001, Cheney sees an opportunity to make his dream come true. A powerful presidential office that isn't too worried about the law, but one that takes action.
There have been restrictions placed on the United States intelligence gathering, a reluctance to use unsavory characters, those who violated human rights, to assist in intelligence gathering. Will we lift some of those restrictions?
Well, I think so. I think one of the byproducts, if you will, of this tragic set of circumstances is that we'll see a very thorough sort of reassessment of how we operate and the kinds of people we deal with. If you're going to deal only with officially approved, certified good guys, you're not going to find out what the bad guys are doing. We also have to work the dark side, if you will. We've got to spend time in the shadows and in the intelligence world.
In late 2001, Cheney was at the National Security Agency. This is the place that's all about intercepting signals, messages, phone calls, and emails to find out threats to national security. He applied UNODIR to break the law on surveillance. NSA Director Michael Hayden briefed Cheney. He used a Venn diagram to explain the agency's operation. One circle showed what data the NSA wanted to collect, another what was technologically possible, and a third what was legally permissible. Hayden said it was important to stay within the overlap of these circles, but Cheney, he saw that differently. Set aside the third one. For purposes of discussion, forget about the law. What could you accomplish if you stopped closing your eyes and ears to communications inside the United States? Under UNODIR, Cheney and his team started the biggest spy operation on American citizens in history.
Do you feel you went too far, Mr. Vice President, in your surveillance?
Absolutely not. I think what we did was one of the great success stories of the intelligence business in the last century. I don't believe we violated anybody's civil liberties.
The government could tap your phone without needing any approval from a judge. But Cheney would do much worse to suspected enemies of America. With help from his legal team, he created Guantanamo Bay, a place that was run by America, but wasn't actually on American soil, a place in legal outer space. According to Cheney's legal advisors, the people that were arrested all over the world were not prisoners of war. They had rights. These people were unlawful combatants.
Let me talk to you a little bit about torture. You have said that you do not believe that waterboarding, for example, was torture. You and members of the cabinet sat in the White House and approved the methods of interrogation that were used by the CIA. Why would something like that reach your level, Mr. Vice President?
Well, because the CIA did not want to proceed without having a very clear understanding of what was authorized and what was appropriate.
It was again Cheney that made sure these enhanced interrogation techniques, waterboarding, sleep deprivation, stress positions, all got legal justification from the Justice Department. So the president could violate US and international law at will if the nation was at war. Now, some people would say desperate times call for desperate measures, right? But torture does not just violate international law, it gives bad intelligence. If you torture someone, they will just say what you want to hear. Later reports made clear that intelligence gained by torture was practically useless. But Cheney didn't stop at torture. North Korea, Iran, and Iraq.
States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil, arming to threaten the peace of the world by seeking weapons of mass destruction.
America was attacked by a terrorist group. So why did the Bush administration suddenly start talking about an axis of evil? Why did they go to war in Iraq? For this, you have to understand two things. Cheney was obsessed with worst-case scenarios. One aide said, whatever stuff was scariest, the vice president was directly grappling with it. And he was also obsessed with threats to America.
One member of Al-Qaeda said 9/11 was the beginning of the end of America. And we know to a certainty that terrorists are doing everything they can to gain even deadlier means of striking us. From the training manuals we found in the caves of Afghanistan to the interrogations of terrorists that we've captured, we have learned of their ambitions to develop or acquire chemical, biological, or nuclear weapons.
So what if a next Al-Qaeda attack was with chemical or biological weapons? Or even nukes? These weapons, you could produce them in the caves of Afghanistan. You needed states. A close advisor came up with sketchy intelligence linking states to terror groups.
And if terrorists ever do acquire that capability, on their own or with help from a terror regime, they will use it without the slightest constraint of reason or morality.
Terrorists were hard to find, maybe impossible to deter. States were neither. To break potential links between them, it made sense to concentrate on the latter. Government had known addresses, interests that could be held at risk. The address with the most easy access turned out to be Iraq. Saddam was not the biggest threat, he was just the weakest link in the axis of evil. And action against Iraq would show the world what it meant to be on the wrong side of America. The problem is, how would you justify an invasion? Cheney did two things: connect Saddam's regime to Al-Qaeda by claiming it harbored terrorists. And second, well, you know it, he focused on alleged pursuit of weapons of mass destruction. Cheney kept on saying that he had intelligence that Saddam had resumed his nuclear weapons program, even though other parts of the intelligence community and United Nations inspectors weren't so sure of that. But he personally briefed senators to convince them of the nuclear capabilities and ambitions of Saddam's regime. And even though the CIA and others did not back these claims, he showed such confidence that they believed him, and the final speech by the respected Colin Powell gave the last push.
Indeed, the facts and Iraq's behavior show that Saddam Hussein and his regime are concealing their efforts to produce more weapons of mass destruction. Saddam was a supporter of terrorism long before these terrorist networks had a name, and this support continues. It is all a web of lies.
Major combat operations in Iraq have ended. In the Battle of Iraq, the United States and our allies have prevailed. Because of you, the tyrant has fallen and Iraq is free.
Manufacturing an invasion of a country without any hard evidence, this showed the height of Cheney's power. But when the mission turned out in fact not to be accomplished, Cheney's power began to decline. The never-ending wars in Afghanistan and Iraq were bad for public support. That the US never found weapons of mass destruction was not a good look for the man that told everyone they were there. Cheney's policies, from Guantanamo to surveillance, drew international condemnation and strained Americans' alliances. In America, they sparked debates about freedom and government power, about the betrayal of American values. Even within the Bush administration, his influence faded, and Bush turned to advisors like Condoleezza Rice, preferring diplomacy over Cheney's aggressive strategies. By 2006, Cheney's influence had significantly diminished. When he left office, he had an approval rating of 13%. What did he leave behind?
He spent 8 years hiding in the shadows, but he is a veteran Washington insider who knew exactly how to pull the levers of power behind a remarkably inexperienced president.
What makes Dick Cheney's vice presidency so special is how he made a ceremonial job into a powerful hub of influence. He showed what can happen when an imperial presidency meets a Congress that's uninformed, unwilling, or unable to act. But the irony is, with all this power, he did not succeed in his goal, making sure America remained the undisputed superpower. The global war on terror, it alienated allies, it fueled anti-American sentiment, it cost millions of lives, and it showed how little the supposed American values of freedom and democracy were worth. And it made clear what can happen when too much power is concentrated in too little hands. Yet Cheney remained convinced that this was the right thing to do.
Over the previous 8 years, what's the worst mistake that you and President Bush made that's still having an impact on the Middle East?
Well, I think we got it right with respect to Iraq. And when we left, Iraq was in pretty good shape.